So I'm going to show here in a few minutes a piece of a kind of documentary film presentation that I've been working on. Well, started really, the research for it started over 8 years ago now, I guess. And the creation of the film started about 1.5 years ago. But before I play it, I would like to give you a little bit of the context and history of the project itself and the content of the project. In 2007, I started working for the Cumberland Trail Music and Heritage Project in Campbell, Tennessee. I was a summer seasonal there for 3 months, at the end of which I knew I was going to be going to Rhode Island to start my PhD. Didn't know if I'd be back in Tennessee or not. At the start of that summer, the leader of that project, Bobby Fulcher, assigned me a job for the first Louis Bluey Music and Arts Festival there. He wanted to reunite the cast of a radio show called the Tennessee Jamboree, which he knew just a very little bit about, the background of. He knew that it had been on the small AM radio station there in LaFollette, which is in Campbell County in the Cumberland Mountains coal mining area. He knew it had been on the air in the 1960s there, and he knew that some of the older sort of local legendary musicians had played on this show. He didn't have any recordings or photographs really, but he had a contact for one person named Red Harrison, and he gave me to Red, and we worked together and we were able to pull off a small reunion that year in 2007. But that small reunion launched into a much broader, longer-term project for me. I continued to work in Campbell County and extended my fieldwork through East Tennessee over the next several summers, and then during my dissertation fieldwork year. And though my research shifted a bit over the years, my work was always anchored in this Tennessee Jamboree radio show and its cast and its community. And in part, my interest in the Jamboree and the reason the program and the cast has been so sustaining for me is because starting very early in the process, a wealth of existing documentation started to emerge from local private collections. In fact, I believe there's a good case to be made that the Jamboree is the best documented small town, small market barn dance radio show in the United States. The barn dance genre, as many of you know, is probably best represented and associated with larger regional and national shows like the Grand Ole Opry and the National Barn Dance out of Chicago. But starting in the post-war period, as small communities began to increasingly get their own AM radio stations, these sorts of barn dance programs popped up all over the place on a regional scale, but now on a very local scale, especially in the rural South and Midwest. And these shows, they became like their own hometown Grand Ole Opries, and they played host to the local country and bluegrass and gospel bands and any other really musical styles that would have been represented in the given community. Most often these shows were broadcast on Saturday nights, but they might also be in the mornings or in the midday or in the afternoons, really any time that a group could get a sponsor. Now, a couple things I believe make the Tennessee Jamboree from LaFollette remarkable. Most of the barn dance shows in these small communities only lasted a few years that I have been able to find or learn about. For a variety of reasons, it's really hard to keep a show like this going in a small town, keeping a band together, a house band, bringing in talent, keeping sponsors. They usually came and went. But the records that I've been able to find and the oral histories indicate that the Jamboree lasted from about 1953, which is when WLAF radio went on the air, all the way till 1978. So for 25 years, this show was on the air. And so the other remarkable aspect related to that is that there's this really amazing amount of documentation of the show, especially from the 60s and the 70s. And so this documentation project that I'm going to show is really a tribute to that level of documentation that survived and to the remembering of this show in the community. And over the years, I have located something close to 120 complete or partial Jamboree radio broadcasts on reel-to-reel tapes. And remember that live shows very often weren't recorded in most places, and if they were, it was because they were going to be played at a later time or played on another station, and then they would just be recycled. The tapes would be recycled. So the fact that 120 of these at least survived is fantastic. And I've also found about 350 photographs and other visual memorabilia from the show, including newspaper articles and advertisements. And in the course of my research adding to this documentation have been over 40 interviews with cast or community members. So in late 2012, unbelievably, 2 film reels, one in color, one in black and white, turned up in Knoxville at the East Tennessee History Center. They were dropped off there for the Tennessee Archive of the Moving Image and Sound, which is an organization in the basement of that building. These tapes were given to Bradley Reeves, who was the archivist there. They were silent film, but he played them and recognized some of the musicians in them as being from LaFollette, contacted me, we looked at them, and we figured out that these were films, silent films, made of the Jamboree radio show. This was just an amazing find. I had never seen these people animated. I'd heard their voices, and I'd seen many pictures, but here they were alive. And there had been a few other little clips from Knoxville TV shows of Jamboree performers. So I started working with the Campbell Culture Coalition, a nonprofit there in Campbell County, and also with Humanities Tennessee, partially funded, work to put together a documentary that drew on this archival record and the voices and the sounds and these images from this community. And in late May 2014, I showed a kind of version of this completed project in LaFollette. What I did, I created about 25 different vignettes or chapters based on parts of the history of the show, context from the community, or biographies of the musicians. Most of them are about 5 to 10 minutes long, and they can be put together in a variety of ways. And the Campbell Culture Coalition has taken these and put them in about 17 different locations, schools and libraries in the area, so they can be used in teaching or a variety of ways. But it's not a just perfectly linear film. It's broken up and can be made into a shorter version like this. So, but for me, the most important part of this, the audience for it, was the Jamboree cast themselves, many of whom had really not been exposed to even a fraction of this documentation themselves because it was in private collections. And over the years, I tried to share what I was finding with everyone, but it just became an unbelievably difficult task to spread all this out, especially the recordings. And so many of them had not seen this, and certainly none of them, to this point, had heard the other oral histories about the show. They had done their own interview, but they hadn't heard the other interviews about the show, and they hadn't heard their friends and peers talk about them as they talked about each other. And so that was a very interesting thing to watch them when they were able to see this, hear their friends talk about this show in a way that they had never heard them talk about. And some of the people in here had passed away by the time it was ever shown. So I'm pleased with how it's developed. It continues to develop. To put this archival material in this kind of representational form and give it back to the community. I wrote a dissertation, and I'm working on a book about this project, not in a historical way, but about this process in the present of these people dealing with their past and dealing with this recognition that they've been given. So this documentary sort of combines those in that it is historical, obviously, but it's kind of a reflection from the present on the past. And it's part of this ongoing process of memory making in this community. So I'm going to try to show about 20 minutes or so of some of these chapters. And I've been working to put most of them online recently, and you can check them out soon at my Vimeo page. And hopefully we'll get them on with Humanities Tennessee and the Arts Commission, get them up somewhere else. What you'll see first is kind of a cold opening of a great piece of audio from this man named Bill Waddell, who owns the radio station there now, but has been grew up in the community, was a part of the show as a young man. And he gives this kind of just a nice overview of his feelings about this. Then it'll go into the proper part of the documentary, some historical context, and then there'll be kind of a bio of the house band and the host, Elmer Longmire, and finally a biographical chapter on Barb Jones, little Barb Jones, who was one of the most popular girl singers on the show. So, if we can get the lights now and see.
Well, I think the next generation is never going to be able to comprehend all that we've done. This is not going to mean anything to them unless you were there when there was no television. You can't really comprehend that. If we don't somehow leave behind a real true picture of how life was, they're never going to know. You got to get it across to them how it used to be, and especially being in the history books, because they have done a lot. Those that perform week after week, they did a lot of work in their lifetime, and sure, it means a lot to them. And if you can get people interested in looking it up and researching it, they I think will have a greater appreciation for those musicians. They did not have the equipment that we have. They had to travel in car from place to place. They didn't have elaborate buses. They didn't have jets. They had to do it the hard way. They'd do a show and then drive for hours and rest a little bit and go out and set up all their equipment, do another show. They sacrificed how they'd load up the car after a show, and they'd talk to people, and they had to take their guitar, their banjo, or the fiddle, or the bass, or whatever they had, and stand up there and sing. They contributed a lot to country music and the gospel and the bluegrass. I mean, they are the ones that made it the hard way. I can't talk to my grandkids about the good old days because they just say, how could that be? You had to try somehow to explain it to them. They'll never get to sit in the audience at the Tennessee Jamboree or the midday merry-go-round. They'll never get there. There will never be anything to take its place. And all we can do is let them hear the way it was and let them imagine the way it was back then. If they're interested in music to start with, chances are they're interested in how did it used to be. And you need to get it across to them, this is how it was. There was 50 people that went into this auditorium, and they sat down, and this is what they heard.
We've got a good crowd on hand already, and we know it's real early yet. And you folks listening in have still got plenty of time now to come on out and be with us. Got plenty of seats for you tonight, plenty of parking room, and we're going to have a real turn-down time, my grannies, here on the big Tennessee Jamboree tonight. We got a whistling microphone here, too. We're going to try to eliminate, here in a minute. But anyway, we're going to get right into the program now and kind of call all the boys around. And what do you got, Carlos? The Remington Rag. Let's go.
Of course, the Jamboree was on Saturday night. I think 7 o'clock to about 11, 7 to 11, at the American Legion building. We had a wonderful time. It was a good, clean show, and everybody just seemed to enjoy. They just reared back and had a wonderful time. We had a good audience every Saturday night. Oh, they were several. They come faithful every Saturday night.
And before long, they got the American Legion building down there. And it was every Saturday night. Lord, they drove some crowds. Well, they'd pack that building every Saturday night. And it had a big auditorium. I'd say it'd probably seat 100 people, maybe more than that. But usually Most time it was standing room. Everybody get there early and get the seats, then they'd stand around the wall. Well, it is noisy.
Oh, it held a bunch of people. It was just a big old stage, and then the rest of it was seating. And they had some kind of a little snack bar in there.
Yeah, concession stand out in front.
Most of the time
Most of the time it was full house. People loved to go down there. They enjoyed the music and had a good time. They just wanted to go down and have a good time on Saturday nights. Different ones come, but he had a regular bunch that was there every Saturday night, buddy. They were faithful people. It was just like going to work on Monday morning. When Saturday night got there, they was there.
Oh, for sure. The Saturday night was, that was for the Jamboree. That was always given. As far as describing that show, I would think that if you want to see some good music, especially around that area, you wanted to go to the Tennessee Jamboree, and for a big segment of that time, that was the only show. So if you wanted a good show, the Tennessee Jamboree was pretty well known. He had some of the notable musicians.
Yeah, they wasn't nothing really other than the Tennessee Jamboree. And you had to either go to Clinton or Knoxville or up in Renfro Valley. Was about the only things else anywhere close around. Buddy, people just loved to go down here. It was close, had good musicians, good place to go to.
It was
really
a clean
turned out.
show, too.
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't see a lot of stuff like you see now going on. It was a clean show. You could take your kids
Yes, you could.
and not be afraid of what they was going to see or hear.
Well, it was a little more down home, and of course they didn't have as many entertainers, but they were about as well known then as the ones in Knoxville. They were kind of on the same level. The entertainment was great because back then you'd have a big crowd and they'd all enjoy it. So they were pretty much along the same line. The people in neighboring counties especially, they would come, and then a lot of times somebody in Knoxville would be on one of the programs, Cas Walker Farm and Home Hour or Bonnie Lou and Buster, and they would announce that they would be at the Tennessee Jamboree next Saturday night, and so word got around. I mean, the people over there knew about it, and some of them would come. They didn't come every week, but they'd come periodically.
This is on Saturday night on down about a mile south of LaFollette. There's a concrete block building up there, and we got that building, and we run it right there. And then we started that Jamboree down there, and buddy, it just absolutely bloomed out like flowers. It was running over every Saturday night, buddy. I mean, I'd go down early on Saturday morning, and then we'd play around and go up to the radio station and play, and we'd just all get together and have a good jam session all day and half the night.
They broadcast this Jamboree live every Saturday night.
They had some kind of remote where the American Legion is. That was where they had their show live, and it was transmitted from there to the main station.
And I remember several times he would call down at the radio station and get more time, on the air so that he could get everybody on. I think you just go out and do ever how many songs you wanted to do.
They'd be jamming in the back anyway, before the Jamboree. Everybody, what they called jamming backstage. And then Elmer would line it up to who's going to be there and when he wanted them on. In his head. Kept the pace going because he's on the radio and he about had to. And he knew how to do that. He'd come back there. He'd say, "You're next."
Oh, yeah, we had some music back then. You ought to have been here. Yeah, these crowd. A lot of times they're standing around the walls. Yeah. It's the biggest thing back then going anywhere around there. I don't know, it's just kind of, we was all kind of homely, I guess you'd put it. Everybody had something in common, you know. We done old traditional stuff that everybody could relate to. It just worked, buddy. Stuff like that ain't no more. Just ain't no more. Kind of makes you homesick of thinking about it.
Elmer, Carlos, Dean Huddleston, Red Harrison, and of course Charlie and Larry was there then. And that's ones that really was the main ones.
Well, the Blue Valley Boys, they was the house band, I guess you'd call them.
The best of I remember, it was Elmer, Longmire, Red Harris, Dean Huddleston, Monroe Queener, and Carlos Henderson, I think was the main ones in their group.
I guess they leaned a little bit more towards the Roy Acuff side of the old-time music, you know. There was bluegrass, but it was, of course, Monroe Queener, he done a lot of Roy Acuff songs, and then some he done. It was just, I guess, about like any of the rest of it, just whatever come to mind to sing, work on it, work it out, and play it.
They were the biggest part of it. You couldn't have all superstars. You had to have a little local entertainment. You know, these guys would go to high schools and fairs and different places, and you know, we'd have a lot of announcements. You know, they're going to be here, going to be there, and you'd hear it all the time where they were performing. They were a big part of the community. So, you know, in this area, we done pretty good for a small community, and people came out for it.
Oft I sing for my friend, wind is cold for my sea. Someone sing for me. I wonder who will sing for me when I'm called to cross death's silent sea. Who will sing?
Little Barb was a sight, Betty, when she was playing with us there. And her and Elmer, you ought to seen them dance. Well, they'd get out there on that stage, buddy, and they'd have that crowd tore up. It was enjoyable playing with the little girl.
Oh, she was a jolly little thing. I enjoyed her picking behind her, and we just had a ball. All of us did. Played and sung, and she would go to our shows and sang on the Tennessee Jamboree, or if we had a show out somewhere else, she was there.
She got to going around local here where we'd play at restaurants and show dates right in LaFollette.
She was a fantastic little something. You had to look twice to see her. But she'd get up there, buddy, and she'd sing her heart out, I'll tell you. And people just loved her. She was a good entertainer, and she'd just reach out to the people, you know, and they just really fell in love with her.
I met her on the Jamboree, first time I guess I ever met her. She was singing on Jamboree. Then later on, I met her at Indian River. That's where she lived. Her family had moved here from Harlan County, Kentucky. And her mother worked in a restaurant at Indian River. Amber and them go out there and sing sometimes on Friday night, or on certain nights of the week. They go out there and do a show on the restaurant. I'd go out there and help them do that sometime. Yeah, she was fine. She's not changed much. Yeah, she'll never change, that and won't. Yeah, she's great person.
Little Barb, oh yeah, she was one of us, buddy. She's a good little singer. Yeah, she was a trooper. Elmer used to fun her something awful.
He would tease me a lot, Elmer would. He was a sight. He was comical. One time he introduced me over at Knoxville. We was over there, and he said, you know, my wife has been trying to get me to not go out with women and stuff. And he introduced me and he said, you see, I'm slowing down. He said my bikini consists of a Band-Aid at a worried look. I just remember going and enjoying it, and I'd sing one song usually when I first started. And Elmer kind of took me under his wing, and then I've sung ever since with him. We had a good time about every weekend. My daddy would take me, different ones, my friends that loved the Jamboree and different, singing, they would take me. I went every Saturday and got my hair done. I think it's early of the morning most of the time. This lady that done my hair, we went together a lot. So we've been friends for years, and she loved music, and we'd go places together. She'd take me. Get my hair done, go eat. I really enjoyed it. I have. Because I enjoyed singing. I still love it. When it's in your blood, it's in your blood. It's still there. I haven't changed a whole lot in stature, but I never let that bother me at all. I've always done things. God gave me a good brain. That's something to be thankful for, and a talent with it. That's something to be thankful for. My cousin, she was talking, she said, they wasn't nobody made a difference because you were little. Said you would thought you was 7 foot tall. And I never let that bother me.
If you don't want me, baby, if you're not satisfied, if you don't care, get on your horse and ride, ride, ride. Since you got on your high horse, those fancy friends you found, you had a hard time seeing me, you're always looking down. If you don't want me, baby, if you're not satisfied, if you don't care, get on your horse and ride, ride, ride. You talk about me, honey, you try to tear me down, but while you're going dirt to me, you're slowly losing ground. If you don't want me, baby, if you're not satisfied, if you don't care, get on your house and ride, ride, ride.
Boys, I'll tell you what, our time is come and gone. Looks like we've had a good time here on the Jamboree. Friends, hope you've enjoyed it. Don't forget our fine sponsors. Brings you the Jamboree. A good buddy, Don Nance, Don Nance Guff down at Jacksboro. Also, Richland Grocery, Jacksboro Station. Car Equipment Company on Middlesboro Highway, and of course their truck lot across from the Woodson Shopping Center. Then Bircham Tire and Battery, your Kelly Springfield dealer. Hard White Electrical Service. They all bring you the Tennessee Jamboree here on Saturday night. We've had a nice time, friends. You have a nice weekend. We'll see you again next Saturday night on the Big Tennessee Jamboree.